Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3, and in this particular video I want to talk to you about how do you actually combat boredom during your doctorate when you're doing your research. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There are so many people that helped me out to get through my doctorate degree that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out as well. All right, so dealing with boredom is a real thing. Everybody that is doing research knows all about boredom. Um, if they don't sort of mention that sometimes they get bored, then they're probably lying, right? It's not always exciting. We have to grind through a lot of stuff. It's a lot of a grind, right? And boredom is a real big factor. So boredom is that sort of feeling where you end up getting, you're doing a repetitive task. So that's an important thing to think about. It's a repetitive task. And your mind wanders after you're doing that research. And there's also sort of a component of that you're not wanting to get back into that, right? So you're just kind of dreading doing that work. And so with people with different disabilities and things like that. So I personally have ADHD. It's really found that out pretty recently. It's pretty hard sometimes to do some research to actually get into it because it's just tedious and you're just getting bored, right? So things like data. So what are the activities where you can get bored relatively easily when you're doing your doctorate, when you're doing a PhD? Data cleaning is probably a big one where you're going through, maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet and you're just cleaning the different names. If there's lots of different observations and it needs to be cleaned, like thousands, then it's just easier to write some sort of program for that. But if it's less than, say, 1,000, maybe it's 500 different observations, it's just easier to do it yourself. And it's really boring to do some of this stuff. You can pay somebody to do it, but they still have to do that sort of boring research, right? So you still are combating that research or that boredom that everybody has to sort of deal with. I had to do that recently, go through data cleaning. It was really boring to do this task. And I sort of have to figure out ways to pay attention because it's really important when you're doing research to pay attention. Not everybody does. And there's sort of various degrees of how attentive you are with these different things. But it's important to pay attention to it because these mistakes can cause anomalies with your results. And that's a really big thing to sort of think about, right? You want to not have that in your data. You want to make sure it's clean as possible, particularly in this day and age where we are becoming more transparent with the things that we're doing. And you want to make sure that that data is clean because there will be errors in there no matter what. Guaranteed, no matter how perfect you try to be, there's always errors. But you want to minimize those errors as much as you possibly can. So, there's different ways that I've learned how to deal with boredom during my PhD and my doctorate now, and I've gotten better with these kind of different tasks or these different sort of tricks and things like that to make sure that I don't get bored. And now it's actually pretty fun to do some of these things. Just every once in a while I have to do a boring task and it's just part of the job, right? So I think, so for me personally, I'm not a boredom researcher in any sort of way, but it's just kind of things I've learned to deal with and sort of go into some of the stuff and some of the stuff that I know with organizational behavior, sort of the micro side of how people work in organizations. This is what I would sort of think about. So boredom is a function of the task itself and the timing of the task. So sometimes the task, if it's repetitive, you do repeat it over and over and over again, you do get better at it, but it also can cause boredom, right? And because you're getting specialized in it, your mind tends to wander, you get less mindful with the things that you're doing and you don't pay attention to it. So for things that cause me to get bored relatively easily and things that cause a lot of strain for me, I try to sort of do that in the morning when my mind is the most alert, and then do more tedious tasks or things that are just kind of drudgery in the afternoon where I don't necessarily have to pay attention as much, right? So I'm sort of scheduling things based on that. So I might write in the morning for a couple of hours and then do less or do more tedious tasks in the afternoon, right? So right now it's morning, doing these videos. I like doing this kind of stuff. It just kind of gets me going. So that's why I'm doing that in the morning right now. It gets me jazzed, it gets me excited to do this. The second thing is when you get bored and you start getting that feeling of boredom or your mind wandering, and usually, so for the first 5 minutes of being bored, it doesn't matter. But after about 10, 15 minutes of being bored, your mind is wandering a lot. I would just recommend for you just to go get some exercise, go for a walk, and get some sort of exercise. It doesn't have to be that long. Usually about 10 minutes, 15 minutes will make a huge difference in terms of how you feel about that particular task. The other thing is if you're ruminating on something and you go for a walk, sometimes you'll get an answer by doing that because you're more relaxed, you're more fun, the blood is flowing in your brain, and you just get a lot of answers with the problems that you're working on. It happens almost all the time that I go for a walk when I'm stuck on something. That's an important thing to think about. So, and a third thing that you can do in terms of combating boredom, for me personally, this is what I do on a regular basis, is I change my surroundings. So I'll get bored if I work too much at home. I'll get bored too much if I'm working in a coffee shop. I'll get bored too much if I'm working in my office, and I'm doing that on a regular basis. So I switch it up so that I'm not getting bored. Because you're really isolated, and that's an important thing to think about, is that this isolation sometimes causes boredom. And so you have to reduce that as much as possible. Coffee shops work really well for me because, there's other people around, but I don't have to converse with them. So I could just do my work and get that stuff done. Depending on where you are in different parts of the world, you can go to different locations. Maybe it's just some place where there's people walking around. You're not going to get bored, and you're going to feel a little bit more attached to people. I don't know why it works, but it works. What another thing in terms of boredom, what causes it is often because it's a repetitive task that you've done multiple days in a row. I usually find if I do one task, kind of a boring task in one day, I don't get that bored. But if I've done it for a week, it becomes drudgery. And so what you want to do is reduce the amount of times that you are doing that particular task on a regular basis. So boredom is going to drive you to basically go crazy. And what you want to do is maybe one day of the week, you do one task, another day you do another task, and you kind of switch it up. So it might be writing predominantly one day, data analysis another, data cleaning another, and you're just kind of working at these different projects and things like that. And the more projects that you have, the more fun it is. Now, I know when you're first starting out with your PhD, you generally only have one or two projects that you're working on really focused, or you should. But what you want to do is keep working at different sort of aspects of that task. So if you're writing the introduction, you're getting bored, go write the conclusion on the thing that you're working on. Just kind of change it up, and it really does help. It makes things a lot more fun. A fifth thing that I like to do is to make my research a game and the thing that I'm working on a game, right? So if you gamify it in different ways, you might even go so far as giving yourself an avatar, give yourself sort of a hero. I know every single thing that I really like to do is always gamified, right? So I do a fitness club in the morning, and we all give each other nicknames. It just kind of helps with getting through the drudgery of doing different tasks or things that are a little bit more difficult, because you can kind of think of yourself in one domain, or sort of characterize you or the character of getting something accomplished, and sort of forget that it's actually you. So you're passing on the feeling of drudgery to somebody else, and it does give you a little bit of strength, and it gives you a little bit, and it makes it a lot more fun. And you can also sort of set a target. If you're doing data analysis, or you set a target that after 100 observations, you go and do something, break it up, go do something, have a little bit of fun. So this happened to me recently, where I was calling a lot of names. I think I had to, I was doing data collection. So I had to collect 500 names for this particular task I was working on. Really boring stuff, right? And so I made a game of it. So every hour, or, every sort of certain number that I would try to reach to, I'd take a break and go do something that's a little bit more fun, a little bit more exciting. And it made the time go by a lot more faster. Now, a sixth thing that you can do that I have tried, or I do, is I just do music in the background. And so it depends on the kind of music, right? So some music is really good and some of it's really bad. And it depends on the task that you want to look at. I prefer, sometimes I'll prefer trance, for example, at some tasks. Other times would be just like country music, and like country music. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling, and it does make a difference. makes the day go by a lot quicker. And that's important sort of when you're doing those drudgery tasks, because we all have to do them. And that's an important part of doing research, is doing these kind of monotonous things. And we just all have to do it. And you just get better at it. You get practice in terms of dealing with the boredom of doing those particular tasks. All right, so hopefully this answers your question in terms of how do you actually deal with or combat boredom doing research. All you have to do is do those 6 things, and generally it's a lot more fun. You'll have a much better experience when you're doing research when you're doing this. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Oh, give me a thumbs up and do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care. Bye.